everyone. I'm so excited to have you meet Deborah Zlotsky, who's with me today. When I show you her work, you're going to fall in love just like I have. And I've been following Deborah's work for a few years now. Her abstract paintings are colorful, graphic, bold, and her use of color, shape, and form and perspective create this amazing world that you can get lost in. Deborah's represented by Catherine Markle Gallery in New York and also Robuchon Gallery in Denver. Is that right? Mm-hmm. She has received Guggenheim fellowships, a fellowship from the New York Foundation for the Arts in painting. She's been awarded residencies at MacDowell and Yaddo and Bemis Center, and her work is all over the world in corporate and private collections, including Nordstrom, Fidelity Investments, Capital One, Progressive Insurance, Waldorf Astoria. And Deborah has a BA in art history from Yale University and an MFA from University of Connecticut. And she's a teacher at the Rhode Island School of Design and paints in a studio attached to her garage in upstate New York. Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
I love that.
Thank you.
Not a big fancy studio right there in the garage like most of us.
I worked in my home in an old bedroom, a spare bedroom for many, many years.
Wow.
This is actually pretty recent.
Yeah. Yeah. So now you have the whole garage.
Yeah. I mean, was built as a studio. So it's got a couple skylights and it's got some windows that look out into some of the woodsy backyard. So it actually feels really plush to me. Yeah.
That's where you are right now. Is that right?
That's where I am right now. Yeah.
Before we get started, I just want to share my screen and show you guys some of Deborah's work, because you probably will have seen a little bit of this in the introduction, but I'm so in love with this. And I don't know, it's the use of color. It's the texture, it's the control and the out of control, the beautiful forms that feel so real. I mean, this feels like a thing. And then I'm brought back to, oh, this is a painting, right? Oh no, this is a thing. No, this is a painting. I get lost in it. And then, some of these are very sort of blocky and others are really organic. And there's some pattern and just unbelievable. So tell us, everybody likes to hear about how, like when you were little, and how did you become an artist, and what was that like, and were you supported in your interests?
Well, my parents were both really into art. My mom actually had gone to the Rhode Island School of Design and has a degree in illustration, but like a lot of women in the 50s, she became a homemaker and mom, and I have two sisters. But she and my dad were stationed at West Point. My dad was a doctor and he did some time at West Point, and upstate New York, Hudson Valley, they started collecting early prints, American prints. And so that got them into fine art prints from the late 19th century, early 20th century. And my mom collected her whole life and was a dealer. And my dad, helped her with that. And so our house was full of those kinds of works. And we were brought to museums growing up. Yeah. I kind of had a benign neglect sort of childhood. I spent a lot of time outside. I actually hated going to museums. I probably would have loved some art lessons, but like that would have been too, interactive for my mother. But, we were just surrounded by art. And on our own, all three of us are, my sisters and I, we always did crafts and we always drew and we always did all those things sort of on our own.
You finally decide you're going to paint, and then you're studying painting. Did you learn in school about how to be an art, like how to move your career forward, how not only in sales and marketing, but how to develop a style or an interest and in work that's so unique and authentic to you. Like, how do you sort through all of the things that you're learning about painting and drawing and come down to your, like, this is what I care about?
I guess I would say, like, when I started taking some of these studio classes to kind of make up for what I didn't have as an undergraduate, when I was at American University, it was very kind of Bauhaus. So it was sort of more formalist. And when I took a painting class at Yale when I was still an undergrad, and a couple drawing classes. I have to say, I think it was the 80s, but like nobody taught nothing. You know, you just were supposed to be there for a reason. So that wasn't questioned, which is good. But you were just supposed to pick things up through osmosis. And there was a kind of gatekeeping in these classes, because either you were really serious and paid attention and just sort of magically had something, or you didn't. Like, I didn't know what I was doing, you know, but I saw there was like in Yale or at American, I saw there was some people in the painting class and they really seemed like they knew what they're doing, really painterly and beautiful. And we were doing, work from life, from observation, and somehow they could just translate what was out there onto the canvas in this very painterly, lush way. And so I actually looked at them. I tried to see what they were doing. I heard what the professors were saying to them, but it was really just like, great. You know, it wasn't like, okay, simplify the value structure that's out there, or do you see how this is more intense than that? Or can you measure this? Like, could you take this and measure it to that? There's none of that. So I didn't learn that kind of stuff. And I was really admired and awed them. So I just tried to work really hard to make up for it. That's sort of my secret weapon. I just try to put in the time. But when I got to the University of Connecticut for grad, it was just like heaven, because people were incredibly supportive, and I could ask a question and someone would break it down. I worked with some great professors there, and they were really big-hearted. One of the reasons why I went to UConn was that I'm from Connecticut, and I grew up in a town that's basically next to the stores or the university, and I just love that area. It's just beautiful. Anyway, it was the first year that the MFA was offered, so I got a stipend, and I was teaching a class a semester, and I got this teaching experience, which I had never thought of, but it was, financially it was great to go there, and inexpensive to live. And, I had my dog, et cetera. But because I had to teach class, and because the professors were so generous with their time, I had to kind of deconstruct, well, how do you teach? And how could I teach painting? How could I teach 2D concepts and drawing? And just between discussions with them, I sat in on a lot of people's classes just to see how they did it, and then what I was teaching myself. So in a funny way, I feel like I'm very self-taught.
Yeah, right.
And I think
a curriculum that you can communicate to someone else, you have to understand it. You have to, so it informs your own work. Yeah.
It's good, but it's just slow. And now that, once I got through graduate school, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but, I've been teaching for over 30 years, and my attitude towards teaching, and I would say most of my colleagues throughout that time period, we're really dedicated to breaking things down and teaching students, because why spend a lot of time trying to learn on your own these really basic things? Why not just learn it, and then you can move on to maybe more interesting things.
When you talk about these basic things, are we talking about values? We're talking about the principles and elements of art, right? The foundation.
Yeah, a foundational kind of about language. How does color work?
Right.
How does line work? How does space work?
Well, I remember my experience in college was, I thought that my goal was to be able to accurately represent something, right? So we had this long project, a still life project, and you're supposed to clock 24 hours in it. And I really felt like I'd nailed it, and I was waiting for my award, but the person who got the first place award for this project had this, very unique approach to the still life. I mean, it wasn't realistic at all. It was realistic somewhat, but abstracted, and the colors were all different. And it was such an awakening for me that, because nobody told me, like, you're supposed to bring yourself to this too, right?
Right.
So you kind of stumble through an education, picking up pieces along the way.
Yeah.
And so you probably make a much better teacher because you're able to, like, put a shortcut on some of this. Like, first you need to know these things, and then you can figure out where you are, like, because your work, for example, is so unique. I mean, you figured out somewhere along the way that your interests are not this, but this, right? I mean, your work is about, what would you say, as far as your paintings, what are they about?
Oh, wow. That's like the big question. Well, so I think that, like a lot of artists, my work is operating on a bunch of levels, right? I mean, there's this process, like, what's the process that you find, compelling, and there's all these formal things that you may be drawn to, but then in terms of, like, some of the intellectual part, that comes in there too. So, I mean, I'm very
talking about just the formal, just like the paint,
just formal.
Yes. So, like, there's a hierarchy, in other words, right? I would say colors at the top, right?
I think I'm constantly moving back and forth between structure and color, and color is structure and structure is color and all that. But, I'm trying to figure out some kind of set of relationships, like shape relationships, let's say, or interval relationships. And I'll make an attempt at color. But then I might realize later in the process, no, the color needs to be this other thing, or the color's fine, but I need to change this, some of these proportions and quantities, and, just the kind of movement and shape relationships and sense of space and color, like, these are different headings that I'm always trying to integrate. In a way, I start the same painting over and over. It feels like I start the same painting over and over again. It's just where I go with it. Is it to have more relationships or less relationships? Or, some of the ones you just showed were earlier. They're probably like little less than 10 years old. So there's a lot more obvious sort of organic movement in those, and a lot more sort of one thing, sort of, knotted and connecting, and a slightly deeper space of things pushing back into space. And how far do I go with connecting one part to the next or separating them? And all of that is part of the process, the formal process.
I would love to see the first stage of this. Like, what did that look like? Is that, is that a sketch? Is it, like, I do see, I'm going to go to some of these images. This was you at one of your residencies, I think.
This is actually in my studio in Albany when I was teaching at the College of St. Rose, and I had a studio, in one of the buildings. Okay. And I was having a show on my drawings. So this was me, it's kind of surrounded by some drawings.
Yeah, and you can see that there's a connection between these drawings and those paintings, right?
Good.
I definitely see that, although it's very different. And I think you're working in graphite on Yupo, is that right?
They're powdered graphite mostly on Mylar, sometimes on Yupo, and Yupo is just like a white version of Mylar. But with these, I would say, I think in terms of language a lot, this is again, like on a formal level, and so here the language is really different. It's smoother, it's softer, it's graphite, it's more organic. There's a lot more light information, but the structure is very much the same.
Right. Right.
And the same with this. So it's like another knotted kind of complicated thing.
Right.
This was, I don't really sketch, usually whatever I do, that's what it is. So these were just always intended to just be drawings.
That's what they are. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But you might start a painting this way, no?
I might, but I usually don't use, I guess I use line a little bit, but it's usually it goes to shape right away,
Right.
and I wouldn't. Yeah, a big part of my process and a big part of my thinking about my work in terms of the content is about history and building up history and building up like a route for me to move forward. So connections get started and then they need to be disentangled and then connected in a different way. And so a lot of it is just sort of building up these basically kind of errors or missteps, but they're actually really needed and important in order to kind of move around.
I could see now, again, this is different, but similar, but different. I mean, I would think powdered graphite on Mylar must be quite messy.
Super messy. In fact, that's why I used to do it in the school studio, because I did it at home for a while and it just got everywhere.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it's such a pleasure to work with. It's, I haven't worked with it in a little while, and I probably would have to wait till, I usually do a few of them over the summer, but this summer was so weird.
Do you miss color when you're working like this?
Not now, because I'll often just give myself a treat, like, oh, I'm going to do this. When I was doing these drawings, I did these for like 5 or 6 years, and I just couldn't find a way to make paintings. I felt like these worked really well and they made sense to me, and I could get my head around them, and they were just so wonderful to make, because it was
there's
kind of
something really satisfying about just looking at this too. It just feels, I don't know. I don't know if it's like pasta or it's soft. It just feels like almost like body, or I don't know. It's very sensual, very satisfying to look at.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, a lot of them this one's like a little more abstract, but more figurative. They were often very like either sort of botanical or sort of biological. So they all had this kind of unnatural, natural. This one is more neutral, I would say.
So you were still at that point exploring, you weren't painting these big colorful paintings yet.
No, I wasn't. I actually was coming off of many, many years of working more representationally. And so I started out working figuratively when I was in grad school and some years after that. And then I went into making what I kind of call these sort of surreal still lives, kind of appropriating bits and pieces from art historical paintings. My background was art history, and it was a way for me to get back to different than this. They're darker, and they have, like this one. And so these were all like bits and pieces taken from paintings. And I did that for a lot of years.
Oh, okay.
And these had a lot of history in them. I would paint and then put varnish, and it would sort of destroy parts, and then I'd repaint. So it's kind of like painting and repainting and creating a history, thinking about gravity and balance. Those ideas have been with me for a while. This is from the 90s, from the mid 90s or early 90s. Mm-hmm. And that led to working with some still lives with the books and things like that. And then I had been doing them. And a lot of times when I'm trying to figure out what I want to do, I literally make myself a list of the things that I enjoy and that are working, and the things that I don't enjoy. These darker still eyes were really satisfying, but they were very dark.
Yes. Very dark.
And
a little bit of saturated color. That felt really satisfying to you.
I did them for a lot of years, and I think I just wanted more light in my work, and that's when I moved into working with the still eyes with the books. And with the books, I knew that they were mostly these single kinds of forms, like this stationary box with the dogs on it. Mm-hmm. I knew I needed to get more ambitious with what I might put into the space, and I just wasn't interested. And at the same time, I was developing a new class for, I guess it was juniors, undergrads, and it was to work more conceptually, more process-based, more abstractly. And that just, in doing the research for that class, it helped me kind of experiment with a lot of things, and I kind of didn't show the work that I was doing to anyone for 2 or 3 years. But that's what really helped me launch a notion that I could move away from representational work.
You're saying that it was through developing this class
Mm-hmm.
and putting those thoughts, making those thoughts kind of more concrete, that you, because a lot of people go through this, evolution from representational painting to abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
They feel afloat in a sea of confusion, right? Like, how do I figuring out, maybe it's about making that list. This is what I care about. This is what excites me to do. This is going to be how you find your way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's hard for me visually to see those older paintings, and like I want to see 3 stages of development to understand, right, how you end up where you are, and not only where you are, but where you've been now for a decade or more,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're still fascinated by what you're doing, or you wouldn't be producing the way you are, right?
Right, right. And I mean, there's built-in variety within what I'm doing. And, I think,
Yes.
I think people get to a point where they, what would be the best term? I mean, maybe somebody might say mature work, or you got to a mature point in your studio practice. I'm not sure if it's that, or it's just, for me, it's sort of finding the best language that fits what I can do with, what I want to say, what I can do with it. Is like a language that I'm feeling fluent in. And my paintings, even though they look very graphic and flat,
Yeah.
I know they have some perspective that's easy to see, but they always have these moments of trompe-l'oeil where there's little pieces of string or little posts or things holding up. I mean, I'm interested in aging. And so my paintings are aged in a way. They go through, I have to go through this certain set of changes and changing relationships. And then I always sort of put in these bits and pieces that might hold up a part or connect a part so they stay together.
So we've been talking a lot about the formal qualities. So tell me more about,
like in this one that you have up.
Yeah.
You can see there's a little support right down there that seems to be holding things up. And even the perspective, it's like, it makes sense, it doesn't make sense.
Right, exactly. So and I find, and this may just be me, but I find those little pipes and things really humorous. Like they tickle me, like, because at first I'm just so involved in the color and the flat areas, and then I see that, and it's I don't know, it's funny.
I mean, I think you get it. I think you get it, Susan. I mean, there's always, I do find them humorous because it's, maybe I have too direct interpretation of my paintings, but I just feel like they're, like aging bodies, they need this help. Even some of the shadows are kind of humorous, that this thing that's so blocky is making this like lovely, delicate shadow onto the next thing, because it should seem flat. And there's a kind of boldness to the flatness, and yet having that delicacy also, I think it's sort of humorous, but it's in a poignant way.
Yeah.
Like this painting right here down in the lower right, it's almost like this little kickstand that's
exactly
keeping the whole thing. And it's a pleasure to work this way, because I can work in a very flat, bold way. And then I can get the small brush out and do this very, very demure kind of painting. And I need that. I like that.
Yeah, that's like filling a need in that area, as well as, like this sort of brown gold stripe is very flat. It's doing one thing, and then this is doing something completely different. It also, like, there's also something visually or formally about that little dark mark down there. I mean, it's a kickstand, but it's also a small shape,
Mm-hmm.
that feels really different and really good next to all of these big, larger areas. I mean, do you think about differences in your work, and how do you think about juxtapositions of opposites in your work?
Yeah, I think there needs to be dissonance in a painting in order to make it come alive. I think if there's too much similarity, and I mean, it's all relative. I mean, you can have dissimilarity that's just very subtle.
Yeah.
You know, my dissimilarity is more obvious probably than some other artists. Yeah. So for me, there needs to be this certain kind of tension between a whole lot of things, like the pull to the left, pull to the right, and top and bottom on that formal level, the amount of flatness to the amount of planes, the amount of shapiness to the amount of little trompe l'oeil bits and pieces, all of those kinds of things. And then, within the color, is there some kind of warm or cool hierarchy or balance? It's, et cetera, lights and darks, temperature shifts.
And then there's the illusion, the difference between the illusion of these forms and shapes and the painting itself with the texture and the drips and right. That's another back and forth kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, when I paint these, it's not as if I paint them cleanly and then mess them up. I mean, I'm trying to kind of paint them cleanly, and then I'm just messy. I just mess up. And then that gives me it's kind of like when if you get something new, it gets its first, car or crunch. You get a car and then it gets scraped up. It's like, I always feel relieved when there's something gets crunched.
Right.
It's like, okay, then I don't have to be so precious about it. So in that sense, this is quite therapeutic. I'm a bit on the OCD side. So, to be able to mess up and actually have the screw up be important is very liberating for me.
Right. Yeah. It's a life lesson. What other ways does your life and your art connect?
When I think of making these works, they're kind of like their own histories. You could it's sort of the metaphor of a history, the metaphor of a body. I think also just like the idea of a situation, like different things happening simultaneously in this, situational way. Yeah. I mean, I used to think of myself as more of a constructor, like I would construct things. But in terms of like how I work and build up relationships, I always go too far, and then I need to change them more simple, more complex. But I feel like I'm a repairer. Right. So this idea of like repairing things and like letting things be connected in a new way, or this needs to be pushed over here, or I have to let some smoky air out, or those kinds of things. This one.
Yeah, there it is.
Has it on the top, yeah.
And that cracked me up too, because I was
actually on the right too.
Yeah, and here, right. There's so much to see. It's like you're narrating this story. This is not the first thing that we see, this little relief valve or the little connecting pipe. It's on second read. What's more, is there something that's more important? Is the sort of narrative in your mind about what you're doing and how this is all coming together? And is that as important as the formal aspects, or not as important? Or do you know what I mean?
I think I just feel like everything's important. I really do. I mean, I feel like one can't just make formal choices. It's always narrative. It's always conceptual. It's always formal. It's always personal. It's always general. It's all needed to make something that has some fullness to it.
You had to have spent a lot of time studying color.
I took a color class when I was at American University, and I took it with this, I really wish I remembered her name. It was so long ago. But she taught the class in kind of a Bauhausy way. Like we went through the Albers exercises, and that was just like, what? It really rocked my world. And then also there was something kind of like I don't know how to, I hope I'm saying this okay, but like kind of like suburban about her. And she was like, you need to go into, you need to go into this, some stores, some clothing stores and look at, she would mention designers. You have to look at, and at first I thought, wow, that's really cheesy. Like she wants me to go
Right.
into, Macy's and go look at the clothing and choices. But then again, that did rock my world. I began to see how, these are designers designing. That totally
Well,
makes sense.
they are, and they're being inspired probably by nature, which you could go to nature
Or to other artists. And, so anyway, it did really open my eyes. So that I felt like that was a very important moment. And then after that, it was more, again, like we were talking about before, I had to teach color in like a design class. And I thought, gosh, I don't really, except for that one class, I don't know very much. And so I had to kind of study it a little bit more. And I think just doing those exercises with my students and just being in the world and noticing things. It's funny because I don't think of myself as being a great colorist. I just feel like I'm persistent, because I put in colors and they look crappy. And then I just repaint and until it's like, oh, okay, I didn't intend that to happen, but I see, I'm liking that. So,
right. No, that makes sense. I mean, because I'm thinking, okay, you must have such vast knowledge of color in order to make all these things work. But I can understand how, I mean, it's a visual thing and it's a relative thing. And, it sounds to me like in your process, this is part of your process. It's a part of that changing and allowing things. It's a journey, right?
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. And I think that it's a matter of not expecting to know what you're doing. It's really okay to have trial and error be, in fact, a big part of the process. Right. So I'm patient with myself about that. I'm impatient about so many other things in my life.
Yeah.
And myself, but with whatever happens in the pictorial space, I know it's going to take time. And that's just the way I'm built. I work with students all the time who can like think of something, think of how they want it to look and just sort of implement it. And that's amazing and wonderful, but that's just not how I'm.
Right.
I am. Yeah.
Okay. So these, in terms of the forms and the perspective and the color, all of it happen in a call and response sort of way. You're putting something down. You start with an idea. I assume, do you start with an idea or do you start with I saw this color combination and I really want to play with that?
I do, going back to what you had asked about earlier, I do start with a bit of a sketch. Like I'll have some basic,
right.
I might have like that curve, like going out, but I don't like all of the complexity within it, around it and moving it up and down. That happens within the process.
Right.
But like with this, since you have this out, I haven't mentioned some of the other things I do besides painting, but I've been doing a variety of other work that I would say is based on like thinking about my childhood. I mean, this is just connected to aging as well. Yeah. But so I've been making some vintage scarf tapestries and some crocheted tapestries. I've been doing a variety of things. Anyway, but these came out of looking at some Wonder Woman and Supergirl comic books that I have. Uh-huh. And it's also from this last year, where, I mean, since Trump got into office, being an American and what what the US is and stands for and how I thought about it as a kid and now, and all those things are really, on my mind. That was part of my thinking, but it was sort of sieved through these 1970s comic books.
Right. How do the titles of your work, I've had the titles here on the side, do they kind of come to you as you're working? I mean, I'm imagining you painting and the things that are happening on this canvas are bringing up things in your life or things that you're, that are happening in the world. And is that how the titles come about?
The titles come about later after I'm done. I mean, my work, each of the painting has its own narrative that has no words. Right. And then I have this ongoing document, Word doc, where I just put in, as I find them in the world, from everything from, New Yorker, New York Times articles, bits and pieces, to novels and poetry and movie reviews and, just phrases. Yeah. I like phrases that have some ambiguity and are kind of suggestive of a kind of transitional place. Mm-hmm. And so then when I'm done the painting, I just try to look at that list of that language and then the language of the painting, and I try to kind of match them up.
I think it's like naming a child. You almost can't do that until you see the child, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, Susan. Yeah. And I don't know what I'm doing until I don't know what it is until it's done anyway.
Right.
Because I don't start off with a singular intention.
This is a detail from that painting, and this is where we were talking a little bit earlier about where some of your earlier representational painting shows up.
Yeah, and it's funny. I guess this is just about as much representational painting as I want to do. I just want a little bit here and a little bit there. It's too much pressure to do a whole painting that way.
Yeah.
Or not, and my interest has waned.
Right. How do you, I'm assuming you've got a family, you've got probably a busy life like all of us. How do you balance it all? I mean, I'm struggling with that. Even though COVID has shut down a lot of things, life is still busy. How do you find time to produce enough paintings to keep 2 galleries happy and, move this forward?
I don't know. It almost sounds too optimistic to even use that term, the work-life balance. Yeah. I paint all the time. I'm working all the time. That said, I also have to keep everything else going, and I want to keep other things going. My son is 26. There were a lot of years when he was little that I mean, a lot of my painting, my process has to do with trying to find something where I could work in short bursts.
Right.
And so I had been working in a way where I had to work wet into wet and work out these smooth things. And it just was I can't do that. And that's, those dark still lifes, those surreal still lifes had a lot to do with, I could work on some discrete, here's the rabbit. I'll just work on this rabbit. And then I could work on this string. Uh-huh. It really came out of trying to find a way where I didn't have to go crazy, because I made this kind of pact with myself. I never wanted to resent my kid or the time I spent parenting. And, even though
you can't spend 8 hours in the studio either. You have little bursts of time that you can do that. Yeah.
Right. So I tried to have a process that I didn't have to work against, given my schedule, so I worked late at night, and, I just worked around whatever was happening with him. And I had some babysitters, and I bet, I was a single mom for a big chunk of that. And it was hard. It was complicated. And it's just hard, and I think being female and an artist and wanting a family, it's a very complicated ball of wax there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I always told myself, though, my son is about the same age. I always told myself that my mother did not pursue her creative interests, and she did have some, and it was always disappointing to me. So I hope that seeing your mom pursuing something that she loves is a big plus, even though you wanted a little more attention. there's some balance in there that because I think not following your dream is also.
Oh, that's a, yeah, calcification or
Right.
worse. Yeah.
Right.
Well, but my mom like didn't spend time with us
Right.
also.
Yeah, there's that.
It was like none of the above. I can say that, I think.
Yeah,
You know, I think it was different in the 50s. I mean, one thing I've been really aware of is a generational difference. Like I never felt a generational difference with younger people that I work with until the point that I started to. And I see how the world the world's really different now. It's tremendously different. And and in a funny way, there have been moments where I see women who are pursuing art who aren't choosing to have families because they can see from my generation that it was really hard. And I see now there's like the next generation is doing it again. And but hopefully they'll have some insights that I didn't have.
Yeah, right.
And some support that I didn't have, and those kinds of things.
Right.
Because I think that partners, I think it's clear now you have to have full partnerships, ideally, to raise one kid even. It's just too hard.
Yeah. So you're working in oil.
Yeah.
Okay. And
I have worked, gouache too. And
gouache. Yeah, that's right. You have some small gouache.
But my main paintings are oil.
And the color is so like neon almost in some of them. I guess oil paints come in all kinds of beautiful colors now. I don't know. I work in acrylics.
You work in acrylics?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you're working in series, it looks like, right?
I usually do a bunch that are similar and in and around an idea.
Right. Then they're fairly good size. So are you, tell me about how you're mixing these. Are you just using a palette and just working on it from a palette, or do you mix up batches of paint?
I mostly mix as I go.
Yeah.
But sometimes if I'm being more strategic and smarter, I will mix up some colors ahead of time just to make the process go a little faster. So while I'm in painting mode, I'm not constantly interrupting myself, but I mostly am interrupting myself. Yeah.
And
invariably I had to shift something. I think it's what I want, and it looks like green, and I put it up on the canvas and it's pink. It's like, it's magic.
Well, next to when you put a color next to something else, it's just a whole different thing, right? It's how you relate. So your process it's not quick, right? You're not finishing paintings really fast because you're right. So, are you able to keep galleries happy? Do you feel pressure to produce, and how do you balance that pressure to produce with the need to take your time?
The Markel and Robichaud they're like fantastic people. And so they've been understanding. But usually in terms of like having the shows in a like 2-year cycle, that I can do. I'm really lucky. I teach, so I have the summers off. I have longer vacations. I'm working through the semesters, even though it's like not as efficiently and not as productively. So I have a good gig to help me stay current. I think though, as an artist, if you're selling your work at galleries, it's more the work that you're giving them in between shows, because I think artists really want people to see the work, not just sell the work.
Right.
And so I know that when I send off a painting that's in between shows, it's going to be seen by a handful of people, and maybe it'll get sold, maybe not, but maybe it'll get sold. But it's, I like to communicate like with all the paintings together. Right. I think that's kind of ideal.
Are you able to stay focused on what you care about in the work and not let the idea of who's going to buy it or who's seeing it or what they might think creep in?
I sort of have some faith that if it's authentically mine, whatever that means, it's going to be better. So I don't think about who might want to get it, you know, but yeah. So I feel like I need to double down on what I'm doing, and make sure whatever I'm doing makes sense, so that whatever I produce is worthwhile. Then again, like I sometimes have these idea or these thoughts like, okay, I made another pink painting. Like, who's going to want a pink painting?
Right, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no. And then I think, well, I don't know. What Kathy Markel often says is like, don't worry about it. We'll sell it. You know, we'll keep it. We'll sell it eventually. She's very supportive of what I do.
Right.
And sometimes I let that help me, like, or, you know, move me and like, okay, I don't want to use pink. I am not going to use pink.
Right.
That will guide me towards making some painting.
Right. Yeah. What do you see coming in the future? I mean, do you feel like there might be a time when you're just done with this and you're gonna, is there some like a lot of artists have a lot of ideas and it's hard to like say no to stuff. I mean, you really need to do that though, right? I mean, you've clearly sort of narrowed down with your list of things that you're and ideas that you're working with.
Do you mean say goodbye to painting or like this particular series or?
Yeah, more like, you know, right now your interests are form and color and what is there a chance that something else might just become so intriguing to you that you go in a different direction?
You know, I mean, sure, maybe. I don't know, but I am very satisfied. I feel like this is a meaty kind of language for me to use. And I think that one of the, you know, I keep coming back to it. I keep making paintings with a particular kind of process. The sustainability of it is because I do take breaks. I do let myself do a series of this kind of drawing, or I have these, I did a whole bunch of spray paint paintings. I'm making these different tapestries. I've done some mural projects and some digital projects. Did like an installation outdoor, more consistent project. Those kinds of things I find very nourishing. And so I don't feel bereft. I don't feel like I'm deprived.
I was going to interject that you can see those things on Deborah's website at deborahzlotsky.com, which the link to that will be under this interview so people can go and take a look at some of those things. I also think that your process has a built-in sort of that the fact that you don't know where it's going kind of would keep you really interested, I would think.
Yeah, it does. No, I think that's a good point. I think is worth, you know, for what it's worth. I think I'm synesthetic. So for me, like my brain mixes up color and taste. And so the color,
nice.
I want to eat it.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm always hungry. I'm going to keep going in that direction.
Do you like to cook as well?
Excuse me?
You like to cook as well?
I'm like a decent cook, but I'm more of a functional one. Like if I have time and I can enjoy it, I will, but mostly it's like efficiency. Because I'd rather be in the studio or taking a walk with my husband and my dog or whatever. So
yeah,
I usually wait for the last minute to make dinner. And if Michael's not around, I can just open a can of chickpeas or whatever.
I want to ask you, because you're a teacher, you may have some advice in terms of, one, how does someone who's, you know, sort of struggling to find their voice, find their way, any tips, like how would you go about?
I think there's just really kind of like the example I gave of when I was researching for this class that I wanted to teach. And I knew that the ideas for the class were good and important, but the kind of open-ended exercises that I did to help ground me and kind of figure out some projects for my students. And what I did was I like looked at artists I really thought were doing interesting things. And I tried to think of what would the exercise be that this artist's work could be a solution to. And I think that no matter where you are in your practice, that it helps to do exercises that I'm going to call them exercises because I think everyone knows what that means, but it's really not an exercise. It's just like give yourself some parameters or look at someone's work that you really love and think of the general headings that this work could have satisfied. Give yourself those headings and just say you don't have to do anything that looks like anything you've done before. So giving yourself a variety of experiences and looking at a lot of artists' work, not just the same ones that you gravitate towards.
Break those things down to understand what it is about that work. I mean, you don't want to paint like that person, but you want to understand what they care about. Because you care about the same things.
Yeah. And then although, what you just said, Susan brings up, like, and it's really okay to do some copies, like that's actually helpful too. An exercise I've given or a project I've given my students would be like, find an artist that you really love and do a work that's like their next work. So you're trying to do their work, but you have to understand it enough to know what they might do. Or take an artist you really can't stand and do that, or do a copy. I think oftentimes you do work that is someone who you like perplexes you or you're not that into. You find some nuggets of goodness there.
Yeah. I like that idea. If you find someone's work that you love and you can translate it into words before you go to paint, it's like you're not just copying, you're understanding in a different way what it is, whether it's color or form or perspective or whatever it is, texture. Because then your mind opens up to all the other ways that you can do that, as opposed to just that one way. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're a good I can tell you're a good teacher, but just translating it into another language and into this it's like more concrete language, our language.
Right.
But it also inevitably is going to build in some generalizations.
Exactly. Yeah.
That are helpful if you're going to then translate that into some kind of visual language.
Right.
I think oftentimes people can get maybe too focused on the subject matter. If it is representational, and I think in representational work, you have to, really look at the abstraction of it and the abstract concepts that you just listed. And then I think for abstract work, you almost have to dig for the specificity of it, because I think it can be hard for especially someone sort of more starting out, like they just see the abstraction or it's not grounded in enough specificity somehow. But to really take the time to do a kind of analysis is helpful.
Yeah. One last question.
Sure.
How do you know when your painting is finished?
Yeah, that's the $6 million question. Tell me. I'm very slow to figure that out. And so I don't put a lot of pressure on myself to know that. That's one thing I think can be helpful. I'm not like eager for it to be done. And I think that in a general way, I would say, I feel like it's resolved when there is a certain amount of complexity and simplicity. There's, a certain amount of some kind of movement circling through some kind of unexpected or a series of unexpected relationships. Because I often can make a painting that looks kind of okay. It just doesn't have anything unexpected in it.
Right. Are there any things that you do, like take a picture of it or look at it in black and white or hang it on a wall or anything like that to help you figure that out? Or do you just you're looking at a series in your studio, right? And you're moving them along kind of at the same pace?
Sort of. I mean, they can be at different, but yeah, I mean, right now I have a bunch that I've kind of gotten to this certain point where now I have to do these other things to figure them out. Yeah. To start out, I have been using Procreate to help me make some changes easily. And that's been super helpful.
I know a lot of our members use that as well.
Yeah. So that's been helping me rather, because I had been painting. Now I'm just painting. You know, like I'm painting a lot, but not quite as much with the Procreate, which is good because I can kind of look through and I can change colors. So changing the colors in order to help me figure that out is super helpful. I do think like what you mentioned about doing black and white or flipping it, or I mean, I turn mine all different ways to kind of figure things out as I'm going, even if I have a notion that I want it to go a certain way.
The Procreate you don't feel that it's eliminating a few steps of that journey that you want the painting to take?
Yes. And I'm figuring that out now, how that's working.
Right. Yeah. Because I could see like planning it out would pretty much deaden it if you weren't careful. Yeah.
Right. And I think it's because I can plan it to a certain degree in the Procreate, but I really, I end up painting almost as much, but it's more
like the next step. It gives you an idea for the next step.
Yeah. And it's also helping me start new paintings. If I just shift some things in one painting, I can generate some ideas for other ones. Yeah.
Deborah, thank you so much for joining me today. It went a little longer than I was expecting.
Oh, sorry.
And I didn't even get to ask some questions. What are your favorite tools? But I think we hit some pretty important things, and really appreciate your time here.
Oh, well, thanks so much for your time, Susan. It was fun to talk with you.
Great.